Well, welcome everyone to the Tea and Talk Credit Counseling Newfoundland and Labrador Budgeting and Money Management with L. Ansel. We originally recorded on the 21st, but we had a record today on June the 2nd. And Credit Counseling Newfoundland and Labrador with L. Ansel. Just one moment. And also for housekeeping, we do have a couple of housekeeping rules that we'd like to talk about before we begin our session. For our Zoom participants, please mute your mic to block outside noise. For our in-person participants, please mute your cell phones. Closed captioning bottom is located at the bottom of the screen. And during the session, if you have any questions or comments, you can place them in chat or ask during the period. This will be recorded and placed on our website and YouTube channel. First of all, I'd like to, before we begin, to say the land acknowledgement. We respectively acknowledge the lands on which we live, work, and meet are situated on the traditional territories of the Indigenous groups of Newfoundland and Labrador, and we acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Beothuk, the Mi'kmaq, the Innu, and the Inuit of this province. We honor the diverse Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land for past generations and for the 7 generations to come. We are committed to listening, learning, and working in collaboration with Indigenous communities as we move forward towards reconciliation, respect, and mutual understanding. Let us carry this acknowledgement forward in our work and relationships as we strive to create a future that respects and embraces the wisdom of older adults and the diversities of all communities. Well, welcome, Al Lentil. It's a pleasure to have you back with us again.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And I'm going to let you lead there now and talk about financial illiteracy. Go ahead, Al.
Sherry, this is just wonderful to be here. It's always great to talk to anybody at Seniors NL, but it's particularly great, I guess, for this venue because we have the opportunity to reach the entire province and we have the ability to reach them at any time somebody wants to go online and bring up the show and watch it. So it's a great opportunity and it's a really, really, really critical topic. It's interesting to look at the screen right now and you see 2 words, financial literacy, April 21st, 2026. The biggest single challenge that we have as a community-based organization that promotes financial literacy is, first of all, convincing people that there's such an animal as financial literacy. And secondly, to convince them that it's worth pursuing from an information point of view. We encourage people to learn something new financial every day. And yes, if you do that in a year, you learn 365 new things. And yes, there are definitely 365 new financial facts that you can learn every day, one new one every day. The biggest point, I guess, to be made in moving the process along is to allow you or encourage you to look at your own individual life as we are moving along. How does this apply to me and where does it apply to me, or how can I apply it in my life? Financial literacy is not one specific aspect of your money life. It's all aspects of your money life. It's your income, your expenses, how much you pay for goods and services, how good you are at being a consumer, how good you are at shopping, the priority you place on things like insurance, the priority you place on things like negotiating credit terms, for example. Financial literacy is a never-ending booklet of facts and figures to get you through from the cradle to the grave. And yes, you should be practicing financial literacy skills from the cradle to the grave. Now, the first, and I guess probably most important point to keep in mind is, and by the way, it's tough for me to explain this because it's so simple, but yet it's so complicated. The first and most important thing to understand is we have to understand our income. We have to understand our income. Now, how complicated can that be? You would be surprised. I'm going to tell you that in my 43 years of practice, and I've seen about 44,000 families in my 43 years of practice, the most common introduction I have to my clients is, Mr. Antle, I'm not sure why we're here. We make $80,000 a year, or we make $60,000 a year, or we make $40,000 a year. I've had people say to me, we make $500,000 a year, but we're not doing okay. Well, I know immediately what a very real contributing factor to their problem is, and that is they don't understand their income. Because guess what? If you make $80,000 a year, you don't make $80,000 a year. Human beings tend to think of their income in what we call the gross dollars. And the gross dollars are what you earn before you pay a penny in tax or a penny in statutory deductions from your paycheck. And by statutory deductions, I mean things like EI, CPP, income tax, your group benefits such as your life insurance, your health benefits, your union dues, so on and so forth. For some individuals, there are other things that are coming out of their paycheck. For example, I met a woman about a week and a half ago whose employer has loaned her a piece of money, and they are deducting that every week from her paycheck. Well, that reduces her take-home pay and changes the water on the beans in terms of how she budgets with what she has left. So it's first the most important thing to get your head around in terms of financial literacy is to absolutely understand what it is you're working with. Sherry, next slide, please. Understanding a
Understanding.
budget in your world. The most important words on that page are in your world, because guess what? Your world is unique to you. Your world is not the same as your sister's world who lives across the street or down the road. It's not the same as other people you work with. It's not the same. Your world is
Mhm.
your world because you have a set of skills as you operate your finances, and those finances and those skills come together differently for you than they do for anybody else. So a budget in your world is not the same as a budget in somebody else's world. Sherry, next slide, please. So why do we need to budget? Isn't it interesting that one of the most, I guess, noticed dates in the year, in the calendar year, is the provincial or federal budget date? We get a note from the government anytime after February 28th saying the budget's coming down on such and such a date. And from that day forward until budget day, everybody's going, ooh, what are they going to have for us? That's because a budget is probably the most critical part of understanding how you're going to get through the next period of time and what that period of time might look like for you in terms of goods, services, and the things you have around you. What is a budget? Well, it's really complicated. A budget is a piece of paper with a plan written on it, and that plan is created by you and reflects your priorities, your income, and your family's needs and wants. And of course, it starts off by determining your actual income. Now, let's talk for a moment about why income would be confusing. Well, for example, if you have a basement apartment in your house, and in 2026, that's a pretty good source of income for most of us. But what if your tenant is your cousin or your sister or your brother or your parents? And what if they are less than dependable with their rent payment? Can you actually count the income that you're supposed to get from them as income? Unless you're prepared to throw them out, and the answer may be, I'm prepared to throw them out. The answer might be, no, I'm not. So you need to look at your income sources from an actual perspective and how dependable that income might be. What if you are using support payments as a real part of your financial life? And what if your spouse is not 100% dependable in paying, or your former spouse, your former partner, not 100% dependable in paying that income? What if you have a little what I call side job? You sell a product door to door or among your friends, and there are lots of people who are doing that. And all of a sudden, your product is not as hot in the market as it used to be. All of these things have an impact on your income, and you need to decide and determine how dependable that income is, and at what point in time do you write down your income because of the lack of dependability. We're suggesting to people that go back for the last year, look at each month, month by month, and determine if you got an income from that source that month. And if you go back over the last year and your rental from your basement apartment that you rent to your brother, instead of getting 12 months rent, you only got 8, we're suggesting that this month you reduce that by a further 20%, 6, and you count the income as 6 months rent as opposed to 12, and so on and so forth. And you come up with a scheme or a means by which you can look at all of these expenses and all of these incomes in terms of how dependable they are. It's also pretty important that within the budget you carry out some self-analysis or an evaluation. Why are things in a budget? Why is there a budget line? I mean, for example, I've seen households where there are 3 family pets, but there's no budget line for pets. I've seen budgets where there is 1 family pet and there's an annual budget line for pets of $1,000. You need to do an evaluation and assessment of where your priorities are. And by the way, nothing is not a priority. If it's an expense and you say it's a priority, it's a priority. That's not an offering on whether or not you should be doing it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying, for example, if you spend $4,000 a year on tobacco, obviously that's not an expense that you have to have. But I wouldn't want to be the one to tell you, addicted to tobacco as you are, that you shouldn't be doing it. So we're not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. We're here to suggest to you that you need to do an evaluation of how much it's actually costing you. You also need to be aware of some sense of how much is too much. When are you overspending? What's your breaking point when it comes to the amount of money you spend on a specific item or specific cost? I met a couple probably about 18, no, it's longer than that. It's probably 2.5 years ago now. And they have 3 children, and the 3 children are star athletes, first class. They are forces to be reckoned with. And the children's activities are costing mom and dad about $7,500 a year. And when we looked at their income, their expenses, that's more than they spend on groceries. Not our job to say, and not anybody's job to say, oh, shame on you, you shouldn't be spending that kind of money. What you have to look at is how much is too much. If your expense is $7,500 and your income is $7,500 a year and your income is under $6,000 a month, that's too much. So now you need to look for ways to either cut expenses or increase income. And of course, that brings us to the next step in the process, which is making tough decisions. How do you decide to cut back and where do you decide to cut if you need to? I said if you need to. I didn't say you must. If you need to. How can you get around these tough decisions? And finally, everybody, I don't care what your income is, I don't care what your source of income is, I don't care, if you are on full-time income support, I don't care if you have a situation where you have a surplus income of $2,000 a month. There should be an attempt at saving. If you don't get there, that's fine, but there should be an attempt at saving. And remember, a saving is not just money in the bank, although that's the most obvious way to note what savings looks like. Savings is also money that you didn't spend. You anticipated spending, I don't know, $1,000 at Christmas time, and at the end of the day, you bought it in for $900. You saved $100. So you need to save in terms of putting money in the bank every month, and you need to save by spending less than you planned. That's your strategy overall. Next slide, Sherry. Now, why do we need to budget? Well, first of all, it sets limits. You know exactly how much you should be spending on which expense. It helps you connect income and expenses. You can say to yourself, I'm spending, I don't know, 30% of my income on housing, or 7% of my income on vices, or 4% of my income on tobacco, whatever the case might be. It allows you to look at where your money is going. It helps you manage debt effectively. The what's the word for it? The killer, the killjoy to a good solid financial life is debt. If you have a pile of debt, then when you get paid, the first thing you have to do is pay for a bunch of goods and services that you consumed, I don't know, 18 months ago. If you take your honey out to dinner tonight and you go to a nice restaurant and the meal costs you $200, unless you have $200 in the bank, that $200 gets added to the balance on your charge card. And this month there's an interest cost on it. Next month there's an interest cost on it. The month after that there's an interest cost on it. And 7 months pass by before you pay a penny off on that particular meal. Debt is a killjoy. You want to minimize the amount of debt you have at all costs. And debt is not a bill. Debt is not your light bill, your phone bill, your cable bill. Debt is you made a conscious decision to go to XYZ Bank or XYZ Credit Union or XYZ Finance Company or to use XYZ Bank Card and spend money that you don't have. You are borrowing money. You are looking to get more money than you presently have. So debt is money you arbitrarily took on as a liability. A budget will help you plan for an emergency. The perfect budget has a line which says emergencies, and you're putting away X dollars per month in case the hot water boiler dies, or in case somebody kicks a baseball through your living room window, or if you have a bump in your car, or you need to replace your tires. A budget will also help you reach and identify your goals. And yes, you need to have financial goals. When we get into savings, and we may not get into savings in this particular presentation. Maybe we'll do that in another one. But we need to save strategically. Every single person on this call, every person on this planet needs three strategic savings directions. Short-term savings, they're really complicated, by the way. Mid-term savings, really complicated, and long-term savings. Short-term savings would be yourself and your family have decided that this summer you're going to go to Terra Nova National Park and you're going to tent for a week. And it's going to cost you $1,100 to do that. And you make the decision in April and you're going in August. So you have April, May, June, July to save your money. And you need to somehow put aside $1,100 in that window of time. That's short-term savings. Mid-term savings is you're driving a car that's 5 years old. And she's pretty reliable, she's pretty dependable, but she's 5 years old, and you can feel a bang here, and you can feel a grind there, and you can feel a sound here, and you know the car is getting old. You also know that when you trade the car, you might get $2,000, $3,000 on a trade-in. And to bring your monthly payment down, because keep in mind, debt is killjoy. You want to bring down as much as you can the amount that you have to borrow in a new vehicle. So if you could save $4,000 to pay down on a car in the next 2 years, that means you need to set aside this much money per pay period. That's midterm savings. It's money you're going to spend in more than 7 to 48 months. Short term is money you're going to spend in under 6 or under months. And then long term savings. Long term savings would be you negotiated a mortgage and you're tickled pink that you negotiated a mortgage. You're happy with the house you bought. It's reasonable. It works for you. It's a good place to live. It's ideal. However, you're going to pay it off over 25 years. And you're saying to yourself, what can I do to reduce that 25 years? Well, your mortgage has a provision in there which says that on the anniversary of the mortgage, you can pay up to, in most instances, 10% of the mortgage down. So your long-term saving strategy is to save 10% of the value of your mortgage. so that you can put it down on the balance of the mortgage as a lump sum payment. That will save you a king's ransom over 25 years. Budgeting will help you reduce the stress in your life. If you know what's coming your way, then you will have some way of preparing for it. For example, if you are living in a house where the hot water boiler is already 7 years old, you can get your head around the idea that sometime in the next 12 to 15 months, you're going to need to buy a new hot water boiler. Get your head around that now, have a strategy as to how you're going to be able to afford it. A budget will help you save because it's designed that way. It'll help you control spending because it's designed that way. I remember my children were young. They're not young anymore, but when they were young, my wife and I always had an excuse by saying to them, they would say, "Can we go out for supper?" "No, we went out for supper yesterday." "But can we go out again today?" "No, we can't go out today." There's no money in the budget to go out. It's interesting how officious that sounds as a reason for making a decision. It helps you control your spending. And of course, a budget will also help you decide between what is a need and what is a want. In simple, uncomplicated terms, a financial need is something you gotta have. Okay? You need, if you're diabetic, insulin, for example. A want is, it will be nice to have. It will be nice to have. And it'll help you distinguish between those two items. Sherry, next slide, please. What is a budget? Oh, hang on. Let me go back.
Oh, sorry.
Well, a budget, first of all, has to be written. You are all human beings. I'm a human being. Sherry's a human being. Everybody's a human being. And human beings, for the most part, without too much in the way of concentration, can remember 3 ± 4 items. That's why our phone number is 7 digits long. If it was 8 digits long, most of us would forget our phone number. So, how many items are in a typical household? Just take a minute. I'll give you 15 seconds and count the places your money goes. I'll count places as well. Heat, light, phone, cable, insurance, property tax, water tax, income tax, um, groceries, clothing, dry cleaning, uh, lawn care, garden care, plants, Christmas. Okay, there's 15 things. Although I think I probably counted about 22, 23. How would you remember those if you had 155? Because that's how many places in a typical household our money goes. And I invite you to sit down and make a list of where your money goes. Not the amounts, but the places. So, like I said, heat, light, phone, cable, property tax, water tax, etc., etc. And chances are you'll come up with 155 items if you take the time and you dig long and deep enough. It's a spending plan. It tells you how much you can afford. It connects income and expenses so you know exactly where your money is going and what you have to do to get to a certain place. When we were raising children, my wife was a pro when it came to managing. I never had to worry about whether or not my wife was not going to be on the same page as me financially. She's 10 times more dependable and disciplined as I am. And my wife would connect every single thing we did in our life that cost us more than $150. She would connect it with shifts. So if we needed to buy a new sofa and that sofa was $1,000, she would figure out how many shifts she would have to do to pay for that sofa. And it just gave her a sense of control. That's a little way that I suggest to people all the time. Think about how many paychecks it'll take you to pay for something if you're going to pay $100 a paycheck.
Mhm.
Budgeting will also help you identify overspending, where your money's going, and if you're spending too much in a specific area. And of course, it's among your best, probably your best hope for financial stability. I didn't say security, I said stability. Sherry, next slide, please. So, determining actual income, step one in the process. Understanding net versus gross income. Well, right off the bat, when we get our paycheck, there's a whole bunch of expenses that are taken out of that paycheck. What's left is what you're working with. Then you can add to that anything you're going to get that's dependable, that you can be guaranteed dependable. And each of you can look at your own life and say, well, yeah, I've got that $350 a month, but that could dry up tomorrow. That sort of question everybody needs to ask. So you need to understand that your net income is money, cash, that happens in your world every single month at the same time every single month. And then you can add other income sources in that are dependable. If you have a tenant in your basement and you've had the same tenant there for 15 years and she or he has never not made the rent payment on time, you can probably count that as dependable income. If you're collecting old age pension, unless you're going to go out and go to work and start creating an income for yourself, you can probably consider old age pension to be part of your income for the rest of the time. Dependable income can be added in. And of course, you calculate your net income and you make it happen monthly. You don't say to yourself you get paid every 2 weeks. No, no. You carry everything forward to the end of the month. Pay all your bills at the end of the month. Now, that is often problematic because bills are often due at many times other than the end of the month. But point being, pay your bills at a specific time every month and pay all your bills at the same time. That way you're sure everything is paid, and that way you're certain everything is covered off reasonably and thoroughly at the same time. Next slide, Sherry. Now, this is where it gets tough because when you have all that information put together, then you start looking at it critically and you start asking yourself, I guess, difficult, challenging questions. Now that you're seeing your net income for the first time, is it more or less than you thought it was going to be?
Mhm.
You look at your net income and see how dependable it's going to be. Your next question then becomes, these expenses that I've got to cope with every month, are they fixed, set monthly costs, or do they change every single month? For example, your light bill is not a fixed expense. It's a reoccurring expense, but it's not fixed because it changes every month. So one of the first things you need to do is make your expenses as fixed as you can. And that might mean calling the power company and saying, can I go on an equal payment plan? And you'll say to yourself, oh yeah, we will, then we're going to end up paying an extra hundred bucks in March or an extra $100 in August. Yes, but you're going to pay $100 less in March. It tends to roll itself out, tends to work itself out. So make your expenses as fixed as you can. You can also, for the most part, make any annual expense monthly. A regular occurring question that we get at the office for particularly seniors is, when I get my tax bill, it's for $3,500 and I don't have $3,500. No, you don't. But I have yet to find a municipality that wouldn't accept a monthly payment. So if you've got to call up the municipality and say, look, I can't afford $3,500 as a payment, but I can afford $325 a month starting this month. Make your costs as regularized as you can. Fix your expenses as much as you can. It's critical that you understand how much you owe. So if you sit down to develop a budget for yourself, part of the process of documentation includes and involves confirming the balance of each of your individual debts. And you want to confirm how much is owed and what the annual rate of interest is. For example, uh, no, I'll tell you a story. I'm working with a woman now that I picked up on my caseload about 10 days ago, and we're working on her budget. And we're at the point in the process where we're documenting her debt. And she has four accounts. She has an account at the Bank of Nova Scotia where she owes $14,000. She has an account at City Financial where she owes $9,000. She has two plastic money accounts, two bank cards, one for 1,050 and the other for about 1,400. Now, which of these accounts do you think we're going to concentrate on? We're going to concentrate on the City Financial account first because it's the most expensive piece of money she has. No, it's not costing her as much in dollars, okay? But it's costing her more in dollars
Mhm.
because the annual rate of interest is almost double what it is at the bank. So our first priority will be to minimize the payments on everything else while we maximize the payment on that particular account. When that particular account is paid off, then we'll decide which is the next most expensive piece of credit she has. And from what I can determine, that's likely to be the credit union. And we'll now concentrate on paying the credit union in full. And when the credit union is paid off, we'll concentrate on paying the bank charge card in full. And then finally, we'll pay off the bank. So you go from the most expensive, and the most expensive is not necessarily the largest. Is not necessarily the largest. And by the way, the one thing that I will tell you is, I'm through my work, I'm involved with other not-for-profit credit counseling services across the country. And one thing I will tell you that I've noticed about Newfoundland and Newfoundlanders is we are very comfortable borrowing from expensive credit sources. When I go in to do a review inside an organization on the mainland, we will often go through 5 files before we find a finance company. I can promise you we'll go through 2 files in Newfoundland before we find a finance company. We are very willing to borrow from expensive sources here, and I don't know why we do that, but we do. So always look and be always be absolutely conscientious of the annual rate of interest on credit accounts. What is it going to cost me? You also need to remember that tax month is not just April. We are liable for taxes in every single month. And if you did your income tax in 2006 and you owed the government of Canada $1,200 at the end of the process, then that's $100 a month. And you need to put a line in your budget for that $100 a month. The probably most effective way to do it, you're not going to like me when I say this, the most effective way to do it would be to go to your employer and ask your employer to deduct extra tax from your paycheck. That's going to bring your net income down and going to cause you some problems at home as you try and balance your budget because you're now bringing home less money. But you won't have that liability next April when you've got Revenue Canada breathing down your neck because you owe them money. You should also consider your family size and what changes to your family size are coming and when. For example, if you and your partner are raising 4 teenagers, when will your family size change? Will it change next year? Will it change in 3 years? In 4 years, will you be an empty nest? Look at your family size. That affects your expenses significantly and it affects your liabilities significantly. You also need to look at your age and your spouse's age or your partner's age. You know, if you're 63 years old and you're going to be retiring in 2 to 3 years, you need to look at, okay, I can't afford to retire with this much debt. What can I do to get rid of that debt in the 3 years I have left to work? You got to look at your age and your partner's age, your family size, and your family structure. Sherry, next slide, please. Sherry, next slide.
Oh,
Sorry, thank you.
you're very welcome.
So, if you go back to the first 5 minutes of the talk today, we talked about how much is too much. Well, we think we have that answer. We think, because for every case where we are proven correct, we'll find another case 10 cases away where we're proven not correct. But we are confident that this particular set of numbers works for the majority. Works for the majority. I didn't say works for everybody, works for the majority. And before we get into the real meat and potatoes of this, I need to stress that not everybody appreciates or understands or can be supportive of accepting this logic. This logic. We'll get into that a little more. So, how much is too much? Well, if the house you live in, the place you call home, the place you raise your family, the driveway where you park your car every night, if that place costs you more than 33% of your take-home pay, 33% of your take-home pay, then you are probably paying too much for housing. And you are likely to struggle financially because the money to pay for housing then has to come out of some other aspect of your financial life. It's a bit of a challenge to get your head around, but it works and it's factually accurate. The house you live in, no more than 33% of your take-home pay. Now, the complication, that's the total house. That is the mortgage payment or the rent payment, the heat, the light, the phone, the cable, the insurance, the taxes, the maintenance, the operation, the upkeep, etc., etc., etc. It's whatever you're paying relative and relating to the house you live in should not take more than 33% of your take-home pay. Now, we're seniors NL, so there probably are very few 30-year-olds listening to this particular presentation. But if we were talking to a group of 33-year-olds, 30-year-olds, we would probably be asking for a show of hands from people who can say to us, yeah, when I went to the bank to get financing for my house or my car, whatever, the bank tried to give me more than I was looking for. Banks will give you 40% of your gross income and tell you can afford it. No, you can't. If you make $100,000 a year, which is not an unusual salary in 2026 for professional people, the banks are saying to you that you can afford $40,000 a year of that for housing, or about 3,550 bucks a month. Can you imagine having a $3,550 a month mortgage payment if you have a $100,000 income? And by the way, that's your mortgage payment. That doesn't include your heat, your light, your phone, cable, and all that good stuff. We need to remember that while the banks are our best friends, and for the most part, the individual bankers are helpful, individual bankers are charged with selling money. It is their job to maximize the amount going out the door. I like to tell the story about my younger daughter. My younger daughter is a nurse. And when she graduated with a nursing degree, she worked as a community health nurse. And she drove around the west end of St. John's in her little Honda CRV and her little Honda Civic and looked after her patients every day and was quite happy. She went on and became a nurse practitioner and was driving over a greater space and time. She had to drive well out of St. John's every day to do her work. So she decided she needed a more dependable vehicle, and my wife and I were, yeah, we'd be really happy if we felt you were driving in something more dependable and more roadworthy than a small four-cylinder car. So I offered to go with her while she went looking for a vehicle. Oh no, I'm a big girl now. I will gladly go get my own vehicle. Thank you very much. Many of you may have had that conversation with your children as well. So off she goes. And we're sitting at the supper table this evening, so I said to her, Margot, did you ever get out to go looking for a vehicle? Oh yes, I've been out. I'm probably going to buy and she named a vehicle she was going to buy. Are you? Wow, that's an expensive car. Well, it's like this. The salesman said to me, "Why are you settling for a car when you can afford a CRV?" Just think about that for a minute. She didn't hear him upselling her. All she heard was the compliment. You're doing well. Your car should reflect the fact that you're doing well. That's a valid point. You are doing well. But can you afford said car? In any event, she bought said car, only to curse it from the day she bought it, but that's another story for another time. And it had nothing to do with the cost of the vehicle. She just she couldn't be told. She wouldn't be told. And by the way, the cost of housing 33% all in, all of these expenses, all seven, eight categories are all in. Seven categories are all in. It's all the expenses associated. So moving away from housing to food. Food, 18% of your take-home pay. Now, if you would be good enough to humor me for a moment and in your mind's eye, put yourself at your last trip to the supermarket and put yourself at the belt where you're starting to unload your cart onto the grocery belt to pay for them. And as you're putting things up there, ask yourself, how much of what I'm putting up here is edible? How much of this am I going to eat? Because these are groceries. The other things are not. And I bet you at least 90% of you are going to put things up there like oven cleaner, window cleaner, bathroom tissue, paper towels, maybe some hair care, maybe some deodorant, maybe some, I don't know, you name it, plastic bags, wax paper, parchment paper. I could go on and on and on about things that we buy at the supermarket that have nothing to do with food, but we call them food. And therefore we confuse ourselves with how much we actually need to feed ourselves. Food is eaten. Food goes in one end, comes out the other. Bathroom tissue is not food. Bathroom tissue is a result of food. We don't need, we do not need to budget for bathroom tissue inside our food budget. Food is taken in and taken out. Now, that doesn't mean these other things are not expenses. They are. Your window cleaner, oven cleaner, laundry detergent, not. These are all expenses that are associated somewhere else. For example, your window cleaner, your oven cleaner are housing expenses because you clean your house with them. Your Breeze or Borax or Tide or whatever you use. They're clothing expenses because you're washing what? Your clothes, for the most part. Clothing should take no more than 8% of your take-home pay. So if you've got $1,000 a month coming into your house, you can afford to put $80 of that onto clothing. But it's not just what you buy, it's how you maintain that clothing as well. Clothing includes, from an expense perspective, from a budget perspective, it includes your care for clothing. So your iron, if you had to buy new iron, it's a clothing expenses. It's a clothing expense. It includes your whatever it is you put on your clothes when you wash them. It includes tailoring services. How many of you can't or don't hem a pair of jeans or don't have a mother who hems them for you? And I think most hemming are done by mothers, not by fathers or sisters or brothers. If you have to pay for these services, I picked up some alterations for my wife last week, and they cost $44 for the items she had done. These are all clothing expenses. Transportation and mobility. Getting from point A to point B takes 15% of your take-home pay, and only 15%. Now, the challenge for us as human beings is to understand what transportation is. It's a means of getting around. It's not a means of getting an ego or getting a reputation or being seen to be well off or not well off, depending on what you're driving. How many times have you seen somebody buy a new vehicle and go, wow, that's a big vehicle for him or big vehicle for her. They must have the bucks. Have you ever done that? I think most of us have in one form or another. And the largest single problem contributing to bankruptcy in Canada after education is the overpurchase of a vehicle. The overpurchase of a vehicle. And transportation is the vehicle payment, the insurance, the maintenance, the parking, the fines. Do you tend to speed? How many speeding tickets did you get last year? Well, those fines are all transportation expenses. Health and personal care should take 4% of your take-home pay. And we're low on that one because fortunately for us, every day I'm alive, I thank God that I live where I live and that a whole pile of my needs are provided for by the state. And the most obvious one, while I benefit from education, while I benefit from police protection, while I benefit from military protection, the most obvious is healthcare. If I need to go to emergency tonight, I have a little piece of plastic in my pocket that I present when I get there, and guess what? My house isn't on the line. That's not how it is in the US and in a whole lot of countries of the world. Health and personal care also includes personal care. This is where you get your hair cut. This is where you get your massage. This is where you get your nails done. This is where you see a podiatrist, so on and so forth. Recreation and relationships. Notice we are advocating that you spend as much money on recreation and relationships as you do on transportation. Just imagine you spend as much money being social as you do on the vehicle you drive. Just imagine what a weird concept that is. We're suggesting that your mental health is far more important than the truck you drive. I repeat, far more important than the truck you drive or the car you drive. Recreation and relationships go hand in hand because when you are doing something for you, you're probably doing it with somebody with whom you have a relationship. For example, if you are sitting around your living room next week and your sister comes over and says, I think we should join the Lions Club. Why would you join the Lions Club? Because your sister joined the Lions Club. It's a relationship, you know? And I could go on with more examples just like that. Your niece called you up and says, Nan, my Aunt Susie, I'm walking for cancer. Will you sponsor me? You probably will say yes because she's your niece. You have a relationship with her. That's where these expenses come from, are budgeted for under relationships and recreation in your budget. And then the final item in your budget is the vices in your life. And yes, you have them. We all have them. Now we tend to think of vices as the obvious things, the alcohol, the tobacco, the gambling, so on and so forth. But there's more, everybody's got them. Everybody's got them. I mean, I don't smoke and I don't drink, but I invite you to park yourself outside my door anytime after June 1st up to and including July 15th to the 20th. And you will hear my wife's raised voice because I've been to the plant store again and left another $150 there. That's my vice. We all have vices in our lives. Another vice that I have is I like to cook. I love to cook. And I will go out and I'll buy something to cook, and it's outrageously expensive. I was cooking a dish, I was telling Sherry earlier today, I was cooking a dish last week, and I needed to buy pistachios. And I ended up paying $28 for pistachios. One item that went in this particular dish. Did I think about that? Did I care about that? No, because my vice is cooking. So not always tobacco or alcohol or lottery tickets, although they're the obvious ones. They're the obvious ones. I'm at fascinated at the number of people who genuinely believe they're going to hit it big. Somebody got to win, and if I don't have a ticket, I'm not going to win. I hate to tell you, you're not going to win even if you've got a ticket. Your chances of winning are so slim, 1 in 1 million, 1 in 3 million. Be careful how you manage your vices and be careful how you rationalize your behavior based on what your advice might or might not be. Sherry, next slide, please. Now, when you've gone through that process, you're going to have some really tough decisions to make because unless you are absolutely abnormal, you're going to have a left column which says X and a Y column which says Y. And what do you do? How do you reduce your expenses? You have decisions to make. Well, you make your tough decisions by understanding how much, and critically understanding how much of the list you've got here are needs. How much are needs? I mean, if you've got clothing, $250 a month, and you've got a shortfall of $135 a month on your budget, you might be able to say to yourself, well, if $250 for clothing, that's a lot, or it may not be in your house, but using that as an example, you can't just arbitrarily pick a number because that $250 may have to cover 4 people. So it's under 100 each, well under 100 each. May not be able to cut back. You need to understand what's a want. What's a want? And if you're raising children, and often our children are really challenged because needs become what wants become needs. Mental health stuff gets in the way and wants become needs. You know, if your kids are misdressed, if your kids are the only people in school who dress like they dress because you can't afford any different, chances are your kids are going to at some point in time start to feel that. So needs can very easily become wants. However, you find yourself as you deal with needs and wants and trying to balance budgets, you should never, never, ever, never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever operate with a slash and burn mentality. We see it all the time. Well, I remember a woman saying to me this is about 11 years ago, now 12 years ago. Well, this year we're just not having Christmas. Okay. She had 5 children under 9. How could she reasonably say she wasn't having Christmas? So don't ever slash and burn. Look for other ways to get there. Look for other ways to get there. Sherry, next slide, please. Savings. The whole point in having a budget is to try and create the capacity to save. Okay? Savings means spending less. That's all it means. You also need to abandon expert advice. I go back to my daughter and her car. What did that salesperson know about her finances? All he knew was that she sounded like she was bringing home a good paycheck every 2 weeks. She didn't have, but she well might have had $800 a month to pay for a student loan. I use that just as an example. Her parents may have been from Twillingate, and she's sharing an apartment with 6 other people in St. John's to keep the cost down. One of the best ways you can save is to liquidate debt. Concentrate on reducing debt as a means of saving. Limit your access to cash. Limit your access to credit as well, but limit your access to cash. Don't always go around with $100 in your pocket or your purse. Go around with $20 in your pocket or your purse. So if you have a mini crisis, you can cope with it. But if you're tempted to spend $150, you can pass it by. And how much should you save? I don't know. But you should save till it hurts. You should save till you can't save anymore. Save till it hurts. And you should save strategically, short term, mid-term, and long term. And we explain those at the front end of the presentation. Sherry, next slide, please. Now, the contents of what I've been talking about is available to you for free. And I believe there are some copies of this here at SeniorsNL, so you can get it here. And if you can't, I'll make sure they have some. Budget worksheets. You can call us at 709-753-5812 and we'll gladly send you out one or email you one. Our toll-free number is 888-738-3328 and our fax is 753-3390. And you can get some of this information online at info@ccsnl.ca. So that brings us to the end of this particular presentation. If you have questions or concerns that you can't ask because you're watching this online, by all means, call Seniors NL. They are wonderful people here. They will gladly record your inquiry. They'll call me with your inquiry. I'll call you back. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Shell. It was a pleasure having you speaking today. And like you said, here's the copy of the forms that you were talking about, Al. So if they want
Yeah,
to call us or call you, we gladly will print them off, mail them, email them. That is not a problem. And same here. I'll just go back there. Same here with the this one here as well.
budget
That's your
worksheet. Yeah.
budget worksheet. All these in the budget worksheet, the summary, how you went over. And of course, your grocery worksheet, we will gladly mail that out or email them to anyone who requests and asks.
We're going to be doing another presentation on shopping for food.
Yes. And again, there's your worksheets you were talking about there for the groceries, which you will be talking about at a future time just to give everybody. So like you said, you'll be happy to hear. You can call them at 1-888-738-3328, Credit Counseling Newfoundland and Labrador. And Al will gladly answer any of your questions. And again, you can also call us. And also, just to let you know, what we do here at Seniors NL is information referral, walk-in service, phone and email on housing, financial, elder abuse, health and daily living, grief and bereavement, etc. We also just had 2 tax clinics in April and in March past. We have community outreach and engagement, exactly what we're doing today. We get guest speakers in talking on different topics, as Elle came in today and talked about finance. We also have social prescribing and link workers, and they are working with our NL Health Services family care teams. And social prescribing is a means that we're connecting individuals to a range of non-clinical services in the community to improve their health and well-being. And as of today, we have 9 social prescribing or link workers across our province. So you can join us for our upcoming session. On Thursday, June the 11th, we have Lunch and Reflect, one memory at a time. It's on June the 11th. In-person's attending lunch will start at 12:30. Zoom session will start at 1 p.m. And that is presented by us, Seniors NL and St. Luke's Anglican Homes. And we also have a tea and talk. Learn about elder abuse. Elder Abuse Month and Elder Abuse Day is on Tuesday, June the 16th, and we will presenting it here. Mary Ennis, who works with us at Seniors NL, will be doing a presentation on that as well. So like I said, if you have any questions, you can always give us a call at 1-800-563-5599 or info@seniorsnl.ca. We have our website, of course, www.seniorsnl.ca, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you for enjoying us today, and thank you for viewing our presentation.